Okay, welcome everyone to the solicitation webinar for the Proto-OKN solicitation. In this webinar, we will go over the solicitation details, and there'll be some time for Q&A after that. I'm joined here by my colleagues from NSF and all of the other directorates, and I'll mention them shortly, the names and agencies. So this is the NSF 23-571, Building the Prototype-Open Knowledge Network, or Proto-OKN solicitation. The agenda today is we will go over the goals of the Proto-OKN program, tell you who the team is, cover the three themes that have been mentioned in the solicitation, and just a heads up, at that point there's a live poll that you'll be asked to respond to about where you plan to submit proposals, in which area. We'll talk about the partner agency priorities and use cases, at least in the way they have appeared in the solicitation. We'll talk about deliverables and meetings, which is a very important part of this program, what the review criteria are, eligibility information, and how you can stay in touch. After that, we'll have time for some Q&A, which will be coordinated again by our team here at NSF. So OKN is the Open Knowledge Network, the vision for which was originally put out as part of the Harnessing the Data Revolution HDR big idea at NSF. And the idea was about having an interconnected network of public data. That's open sort of refers to that. But of course, open could also refer to the idea that you have public interfaces to your data to help power the next wave of AI exploration while addressing various societal challenges. So that's important as well, because we want to do it in the context of applications, and that's why use cases are so important. The first step in this, in terms of programs at NSF that supported this, was the NSF Convergence Accelerator, which had a track A back in 2019, which initially funded 21 phase 1 projects for OKN. Those 21 could compete for phase 2, and then we funded 5 phase 2 projects, and that went from 2020 to 2022. The next step along the way was we ran an innovation sprint, NSF along with OSTP, from February to June of 22, in which we developed this roadmap for a Prototype-OKN. Which are really driven by use cases to help understand the scope and the opportunities and challenges of doing this. And of course, here we are now at the third step, which is this solicitation that's about actually building the Prototype-OKN. So in that sense, this is a solicitation about build and not purely research. The program goals, therefore, are to build a prototype version of an integrated data and knowledge infrastructure called the Open Knowledge Network. You create a platform that would empower government and non-government users, fueling a variety of applications such as evidence-based policy making, continued strong economic growth, game-changing scientific breakthroughs, while addressing the complex societal challenges, everything from climate change to social equity and so on. So that all of that is basically to say that the use cases are very important and will be carefully evaluated. This is a multi-agency effort and a multi-agency team here. So NSF is leading the solicitation. I'm Chaitan, which I maybe should have said right at the beginning, but I'm Chaitan. I'm Senior Advisor in the TIP Directorate at NSF, the Technology, Innovations and Partnerships, Innovation and Partnerships Directorate, under which this program is being run. And I'm accompanied here by my colleague in TIP, Jemin George. But we also have our other agency folks from NASA. We have Samruit Gebre and also Lawrence Sanders, who's a contractor at NASA and acting as project scientist in the Gene Lab right now. From NIH, we're very happy to have Haluk Risat from the Office of Data Science Strategy there. From National Institute of Justice, we have Elizabeth Groff from the Office of the Director. From NOVA, we have Ryan Berkheimer, who is at the National Centers for Environmental Information. And from USGS, Dalia Varanka, who's at the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. There are actually other agencies who are also interested. Did I skip that? I thought I had one more. Oh, that might come later. So there are other agencies who are also interested in this program, and I think I have a slide later to mention them. The program structure, we are operating in 3 themes. So we expect proposals to come in one of the themes, and that should be marked clearly as the solicitation says. Theme 1 is about the use cases. So theme 1 projects would focus on the creation of knowledge graphs in collaboration with other federal agencies to address specific societal challenges. So the agency collaboration is an important aspect of this. You may request budgets of up to 1.5 million for up to 3 years. And we estimate maybe 8 to 10 awards based on the budget. Theme 2 is what we are calling the Proto-OKN fabric. This is the effort to create a common technological infrastructure across all of these. And so the focus is on the development and deployment of the platform and framework to interconnect the knowledge graphs from the various Theme 1 efforts. And also, outside of this, for projects that want to connect to us, to create the Proto-OKN and implement it on a cloud-based infrastructure. These projects may request up to $1.5 million with a duration of up to 2 years. We are estimating that we'd fund up to 2 projects in this area. And this could potentially be renewed for another 2 years with the goal of creating one overarching system. So in some sense, hidden under there is the notion that if we funded 2 projects, at the end of the day, we'd like to have one effort coming out of it. And theme 3 is about the education and outreach. In the innovation sprint, this was very important topic that was discussed about the need for education and training at a variety of levels. Everything from, in some sense, the lay user to the technical, to the programmer, the technical expert. So it focuses on building education, training, and outreach materials for users, developers, and other constituents. Okay, and this one may request up to 1.5 million with a duration up to 3 years. And we plan to fund a single award over there. And as I mentioned, there is a live poll coming up shortly where you'll be able to indicate your theme of interest. Is it going to be 1, 2, or 3? And also, by the way, your willingness to serve as a reviewer for the program. So the focus and emphasis of the Theme 1 projects, which are the use case efforts, should be, you should have already identified key public data sets. So the exploring of which data should I be using shouldn't really be part of this effort. You should already know. The data must come from more than one source. So we don't want this to be a project that's just single source focused and may include multiple types, because we are really talking here about data integration across multiple data sets. Proposals basically should describe in detail how they're going to do it. In other words, the software tools, the workflows, the ontology, if you're going to use something like that, knowledge design and implementation methods for creating the knowledge graph infrastructure from the underlying data. So we're looking, in other words, we are asking projects to be very specific about how are they going to do this. End users and data providers should already have been identified and should be engaged and committed to this effort. So both end users and the data providers. So both ends need to be engaged as part of your project. And we are especially seeking proposals that align with the priorities from the partnering agencies, as we described. The Theme 1 projects will work in collaboration with Theme 2 and 3. That's another important aspect. These are 3-year efforts. And as you go down the line after about a year, maybe 1.5 and year 2, we would be expecting all these, overall, it's not a huge number of projects. We expect something like 10 to 12 projects in this program. So we expect that to behave as a tightly connected cohort. Theme 2 would be the Proto-OKN fabric. We'll focus on the development and prototyping of robust, scalable, cloud-based technological and technical infrastructure for Proto-OKN, and support and demonstrate use of this infrastructure in prototype mode, at least by Theme 1 projects by year 2, would be by the end of year 2. Strongly encouraged to include industry partners as leads, co-PIs, or collaborators, or basically, people who understand what it means to run robust production systems, and or ensure that the project is able to adopt a production systems approach. Some of the requirements we'll be looking for in these teams is, of course, the technical skill. Do you understand the technology, how to deploy it, etc. But also the ability to provide support, technical support to users. So you can think about this as user support, because you'll have all these Team 1 projects might be talking to you. They might have different levels of technical sophistication themselves, and they might be coming to you for help and answers and so on. And that's why the project should also be able to demonstrate a very open and collaborative approach, not like, oh, no, we are doing our thing, and it's either our way or the highway. They should be open to listening to what the customer, in this case, Team 1, is saying and trying to accommodate the best way. I mean, if it turns out that Team 1 projects have to change and you convince them, that's a different matter, but you have to be flexible. Team 3 are on education and public engagement. Basically, the idea is to create educational and training materials and tools addressing the broad range of users of the Proto-OKN. As mentioned before, goal of the education and training materials is to help explain how this effort, the Proto-OKN, impacts society and help prospective users understand how to engage. Okay, so if someone says, "Wow, that looks cool," where do I plug in my system? And you should have enough education training materials to facilitate that. Proposals should describe how they would develop materials to help explain the underlying concepts and techniques of the Proto-OKN, provide conceptual information and functional details necessary for users to effectively use the system, so they know what can be done or what cannot be done, etc. And the content and technology contributors to effectively contribute into the system. So I think this is the time for the live poll. So what we would like you to specify is which theme you think you're going to be applying under, and also if you're interested to serve as a reviewer. Okay, now the question I have is what happens now? I guess a poll is supposed to go up, right?
Yes. Yes.
And there we have it. Do we know how many people there are? Can you see that information? How long should we?
386.
About 385 now.
Okay. So Jemin, can I end the poll or does someone else have to do this? Oh, okay. All right, I'm going to move along. Okay. Let's see. Right. So just want to quickly go over what was in the solicitation in terms of the agency priorities that were listed. In the case of NASA, they've identified applications related to space biology, which involves integrating diverse data by creating a knowledge graph that would connect space biology terminology with the terminology used by the larger biomedical research community. In the case of National Institute of Justice, one example is tracking non-fatal firearm injuries, create a single source of information for non-fatal interpersonal and intentional firearm, a gunshot injuries to support the development of evidence-based firearm violence prevention policy that depends upon timely and accurate and micro-level data. Another example from NIJ is mining criminal justice insights from existing data, link the data sets in the National Archive of Criminal Justice Data, NACJD, to support the exploration of cross-cutting questions, provision of new insights, and the promotion of knowledge development across the criminal justice system. For NOAA, it's interested in use cases that leverage NOAA's data to address challenges in areas related to climate and the blue economy, with an emphasis on ensuring equitable distribution and use of data. USGS, an example, is topographic data integration to integrate topographic data from the USGS national map with other related distributed data sets to serve a variety of needs. NIH actually has indicated their interest on the Proto-OKN fabric side, which is theme 2. And I think the way to think about that is NIH actually funds a lot of theme 1s of their own, right? So NIH has a big portfolio of knowledge graph projects that they fund, and they're very interested in this idea that there could be a common fabric that will enable a connection across all of this. So that is NIH's interest. And as the program moves forward, how all of that gets done will evolve, I'm sure. This is where I was saying there are other agencies that have also expressed interest who are not formally listed on the boilerplate front sheet of the solicitation. So DARPA has, and these are also in the solicitation, by the way. So DARPA has talked about their interest in supply and demand networks. Department of Transportation is on the transportation equity issues. US Army is interested in the DoD innovation ecosystem, and the Veterans Affairs are interested in social determinants of health. These indicate a certain set of use cases. There's much broader application use cases that emerge from the OKN Innovation Sprint, which includes all of these equity, social care and justice issues, climate change, disaster management, energy systems, health communications and information accuracy, innovation and research ecosystems, and supply chain decision support and financial risk. I think broadly what we would say here is the list of topics in the solicitation are not meant to be restricting or exclusive. I mean, they're just examples. If you have other use cases you have identified, that would be okay. The requirement really is the federal agency engagement. Because one, we are looking to see that you're working with real public data. And two, we are looking to see that you're really engaged agencies. Remember that the Open Knowledge Network, the prototype is about building a system that will carry on the system and the community, because NSF is not in the business of continuing to fund these kind of things forever. So we would like to create a community, and the best way to sustain it is if you have enough of an interest community out there. And we are looking at the federal agencies as one such community. The roadmap report itself is available at this URL, which is at the bit.ly OKN roadmap. These slides will be made available at our program site, and I think this recording will also be made available, so you'll have that information. So program deliverables. So this is a very important part of the solicitation of this program, really. Proposals should clearly identify what are your deliverables and actually draw it down to quarterly timeline. The timeline should include intermediate milestones that are associated with the data, so the data access, ingestion, the development and deployment of the knowledge graph aspect of it, testing, validation, and evaluating what you're doing, any curation or analytical tools that might have to be used, or any training materials that might be essential for what you're doing. And of course, theme 2 should also include a plan for testing the system at scale, so you don't build something that just works on 2 machines or 1 application or some such thing. There is a timeline in the solicitation. We will have a kickoff meeting that will be in person in Washington, D.C. Once the projects are funded. And there are milestones First 3 months, you want to define the alpha level deliverables for your project. After 6 months, you want presentations of concepts of alpha level and alpha level deliverable. In 12 months, you want to have a demonstration of that. In 15 months, you want to have the concepts available for the beta level. In 24 months, you want a demonstration of the beta. And in 30 months from start, deployment of the prototype. So that should help you in drawing up your project activities timeline. We expect to have a lot of coordination across all the projects. As I said, it's going to be a small cohort of projects, and both NSF and the other agencies will be pretty hands-on with you all to help you along the way. All Proto-OKN projects must plan for at least the following set of meetings. There'll be a kickoff meeting. They'll be held soon after the awards are made. A quarterly meeting, i.e. every 3 months, could be in person or remote. And the goal here is simply to monitor progress and make adjustments where we need it. So we want to be helpful here, make sure that if you're faltering with something that, how do we help you keep moving? And it could also be that these kind of meetings, especially in the beginning, are among subgroups of projects, because maybe not everyone needs to meet because they may all be in different levels, at least in the early days of progress. We also expect to have a year 2 and a year 3 kickoff meeting, which would also be in person. The review criteria, the standard NSF review criteria apply, which is intellectual merit, the potential to advance knowledge. We understand that a lot of this is translational research, but as you all, I'm sure, know, there's a lot of knowledge to be gained from that. What works here, what doesn't work. When I'm dealing with this kind of data, what do I need to do to convert it to a knowledge graph? Or when I'm connecting this to that, what are the ways of connecting them? All of this is new knowledge that might be derived from what you do, which may actually be extremely valuable and useful for extending it to other data sets. And of course, the broader impact. What are the societal impacts? And that's where the application, the applications that you engage with would be important. There are additional review, solicitation-specific review criteria. What would be the impact on the identified user community? That's why we want you to have real engagement with real users, so that you get a good sense that what I'm doing really matters to this user that's coming along for the ride. What is the potential for the proposed effort to profoundly impact one or more end user communities? Will the activity provide a specific benefit to the user community and help them achieve their desired outcome? So it should be something that they really desire, right? Something that they would have told you, wow, if you can do this, it really would change what I'm able to do. We will be also looking for partnerships. Do you have make a strong case that partnership and end users from multiple sectors are poised to form deep and diverse partnerships? The point here is don't put people on there just to say, oh yeah, I have an agency, and then you never talk to them, right? These partnerships are meant to be deep and engaging and really essential to your project. So if we have one project that has very deep, meaningful partnerships versus somebody else who's going to touch base every once in 6 months or once in a year, the first one would be much better than the second, right? Does the proposed use case support and contribute to the mission of at least one identified end user federal agency? In other words, not only that these are meaningful applications, but really meaningful at a level where an agency person will say, yeah, this actually matters to us. And this this criteria, you can think of it as the kind of criteria that gives us a chance to keep this going, right? If it's really in the critical path of some agencies, then they might say, yeah, we got to keep this going because this is essential to our mission. Also, we'll be looking for deliverables. Does the overall effort indicate a high probability of deliverables within 36-month period? So you want to make sure you have people on your project who really know how to draw up project plans and make them realistic, understanding what funding you have, and so on and so forth, right? And sometimes a project plan might look modest, but it's actually achievable. That's better than having a wildly ambitious plan that's never achieved, okay? Are there clear achievable goals and objectives in the 12-month alpha release and the 24-month beta release? Because that's all in the solicitation. You're supposed to put that all in your proposal and for the final release. Use case integration, is the proposed project appropriate? I.e., is it a match to one of the themes in the solicitation? And is there convincing evidence of how the effort will contribute to the success of the Proto-OKN effort and support potential use case integration efforts? And again, that's there because we don't want to encourage isolated projects that might be doing fantastic things. As you all know, this world is very rich and there's a lot going on. And you might be doing a fantastic project, but it doesn't connect to anything else and has no notion of the OKN, of being an open knowledge network, or doesn't connect to anything else in the program. That wouldn't be so nice. Finally, we are very serious about the issue of data ethics. And so especially, it's possible that almost every data you deal with at one way or the other connects to this issue. It's also possible that in some cases, maybe it's not as much of an issue, but certainly if you're looking at health data, no doubt criminal justice data, maybe if you're looking at biology on Mars, maybe it's not so much, but there could be other ethics issues in terms of, and this has come up, by the way, in the innovation sprint as well. There could be all sorts of data governance issues that impinge on the ethics question. Who's allowed to do what? Who gets the authority in this system? Who's the boss? And those kind of issues. So we just want you to be very aware and alert to the full range of issues that come up when we talk about ethics standards. Okay. So finally, the award information, the award, by the way, we expect to make them as cooperative agreements, and you can go read the NSF PAPPG guide to see what a cooperative agreement means. But that usually gives us more visibility into what you're doing and allows us to have a more hands-on approach to the effort. We expect to fund about 10 to 13 projects based on the funding available. As I said before, 8 to 10 awards in the theme 1, 1 to 2 awards in theme 2, and an award in theme 3. Okay. And currently, with the amount we have available for this, subject to, availability of funding as usual, is $20 million. Eligibility, all of these organizations are eligible: for-profit organizations, non-profit, non-academic organizations, institutes of higher education, 2- and 4-year IHEs. There are no restrictions on who can serve as a PI. There is a limit on the number of proposals per lead organization, so you should be careful at your own institution, or whether it's a university or industry or whatever, to make sure that only one is coming out of there. Otherwise, I don't know what we say in the survey. Usually the first one stays and the others go. Others are returned without review. There's a limit on number of proposals per PI or co-PI. There's no limit on number of proposals per PI. So the only constraints are the things that are above. Okay, one per institution. Finally, here's the way to stay in touch. There's a general inbox where you can send us emails if you have questions, OKN@NSF. There's the website for the program where you should look for up-to-date information. The deadline for submission is June 20th, 5 p.m. your time. There are already 3 office hours that we have organized, which are listed here, on April 27th, May 4th, and May 18th, from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. So you have to sign up for those, I believe, and there's a limit of 50 for each of those per session. And then there is, if you please do go to the website, there is a listserv, Proto-OKN listserv, where you can join to receive related news and announcements. Thanks. And I'm going to, before I turn to the questions, Jemin, is there anything else we should say? Did I miss anything?
I think you pretty much covered everything.
Great. In that case, we are now open for questions.
So you've got a bunch of questions about the slide deck, so you may want to address the availability of the slide deck.
Yes. Thanks, Mike. And that was Mike Parmentier, who's in our Convergence Accelerator, helping us along with Yolanda. The slide deck will be available, right, Jemin? It'll be on the program website.
Yes.
Yeah. Soon.
We have close to 42 questions that need to be answered. We'll try to get to them as much as possible, and the rest of them we'll get to them and send out via email or make them available somehow.
Well, what is the somehow? Would that be on the listserv? Are those the kind of things?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we can post it on the listserv. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we'll send out the question and answers to the via email.
So I'm going to let someone read those out to me or to us, I guess.
Okay. I'll start with the first one that I have. What level of engagement with end users and other partners is expected prior to applying for the program? Could you provide some examples of what would be considered sufficient engagement?
Okay, good question. Well, basically, one way to say it is you certainly don't want to start the engagement after the project has begun. In other words, you picked up the phone, called somebody at, I'll pick USGS, called someone at USGS and said, hey, we're doing something with topographic data. And do you think this sounds good? And the USGS person might say, yeah, that sounds great. And then you write a proposal, okay? That would be not adequate interaction. What you really want to do is have some sessions with your users, whether they're the data providers or the end users. In this case, USGS could be both, or it's one of them. And really demonstrate in your proposal that, no, we have had these meetings. Here's the discussion we have had. Here are the pros and cons that we have identified. And not only that, but you say going forward in the next 3 years, here's how USGS is going to engage with us. And we want to see some serious engagement. And I think all of that, usually you can't make that up unless you really had a good interaction with the agency. This is the way I would put it. And anyone else, even from the other agencies, if you want to jump in with examples of how do you demonstrate that, please feel free. Okay, next.
Okay. Is the expectation for Theme 1 proposals that the lead or PI would be from the computer science background working on data representation?
No, that's not the expectation. So the team should be whatever makes sense. You could absolutely have somebody who's from a non-computer science related to, like say a criminal justice expert who's working with a team that has knowledge representation people and computer scientists. So that's not a requirement for Theme 1.
How much will recipients from the different themes know about projects from the other themes?
Yeah, that's a good question. You'll know nothing. So part of the challenge here is going to be, especially if you're a Theme 2, and I think we sort of think of it as it could also be the way for us to differentiate people who look like they know what they're doing versus maybe people who may not have as much of a clue, in the sense, if you've already been experienced to doing collaborative work and support, creating some technological infrastructure for users, hopefully that comes out in your proposal, even though you don't know exactly who the users are going to be. I mean, you sort of know the nature of who the users are. They're all going to be people with data and knowledge graphs and those kind of technologies that they need. But unfortunately, since we are not doing this as a two-phase project or whatever, or a two-phase program, you would have to write your your Theme 2 proposal, just assuming that there's going to be 7 or 8 projects that would want to work with you. And for Theme 1, it's the same thing. I think the way the distinction will come is if you are Well, I shouldn't say it. Okay, for theme one, the same thing, which is that you will need to eventually interact, as we said, maybe in year 2 or so, with somebody who's providing the infrastructure to keep the whole thing going. And so you should just be aware that at some point you'll have to talk to somebody else. So you don't want to have a group that's totally insular, that doesn't want to talk to anyone else. That won't help.
Okay. I would expect that building educational material will closely depend on the content of the successful theme 1 and theme 2. How are theme 3 applicants expected to learn about theme 1 and theme 2 content? Are all applications happening at the same time?
All applications will happen at the same time. And that, in a way, it's a good question. So I would say theme 3, people who are putting in theme 3 proposals, just like as we had in the innovation sprint, should definitely be aware of the technologies of theme 2 would be deploying. So you can't be somebody who says, I'm in the education space, I know nothing about knowledge graphs and whatever it is, triple stores, or pick your technologies, Sparkle, and yet I want to develop educational materials. So I think to be plausible, you should be able to say, here are the key technologies, and here's our skill set. Now we will work with whoever gets funded in theme 2 to maybe modify these materials and so on, because the technology is not wildly different. There's a graph database. It might be graph database X instead of Y, but the principles in terms of education and training would be very similar. So that's as far as theme 2 is concerned. So theme 3 folks should have at least that much awareness that they could create. So the question of, do I need to be a computer scientist, that was earlier. In theme 3, maybe you do need to have some people who understand the computer science of it because they're developing the technologies. At the same time, you could have domain people who have done ontologies, etc., because you also need to develop materials more from a domain perspective. It's not all computer science, right? So that's why theme 3 also potentially requires a very multidisciplinary group. Now, as far as connecting with theme 1, the solicitation does say that both theme 1 and theme 2 need to allocate some time to work with theme 3, because as you're developing things in theme 1, there may be educational materials that you would like to have spun out, and either that's some of your effort along with theme 3's effort, or you want to pass it on to them, but that has to be a conversation. So with theme 1, you won't know what the domains are. You won't know if all the projects we have funded are just biomedicine, or maybe half of them are geoscience and other are biotech. All of that will happen only after the funding happens. That's why you have the kickoff meeting where you'll all meet with each other. But again, it's not an unbounded problem because we are funding only about 10 projects, and there are going to be about 8 theme 1 projects. So hopefully that's manageable over a 3-year period.
Along with publicly available data sets, can the team propose to collect extra data not currently available?
Yes. By the way, don't collect it, but you work with data that's already there. So there's not a program for ab initio data collection as such. But if you mean by collection, you've identified some data set that's not public, but is important to integrate. And actually some of the criminal justice stuff might be like that. Absolutely, that comes up, even though we are calling it open knowledge network. From day one, there are so many use cases where there's sensitive data. By the way, AI ethics, ethics and standards come in there quite a lot when it's sensitive data, who gets access, who decides who gets access, all of those things. So that's fine. In that case, there are 2 ways to think about this. The open could either mean even among a closed community, you want to be open. You know what I mean? So if I'm behind the firewall, well, everything behind that should be able to talk to each other. Okay, so don't create bespoke single data things that don't talk to anything else. Secondly, there may still be access controls. You may be willing to allow other applications. So in other words, you might need to have APIs, etc., so that if it's a sufficiently authenticated user, they can get in and use your system. So that's okay.
Well, and this is a quick one. Can you share the results of the poll? Do you plan to do that?
Yeah,
Jemin?
I was seeing as it went by. I actually don't know. What is the policy there? Can we? Why
Uh,
not?
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on the nature of the poll. If there's any sensitivities around that, I mean, it's not official proposals, so it may not be a big deal at this point. We can't release the number of proposals that we get, but this might be something that's okay to release.
I mean, I would say if, Jemin, if we can put the data on the website as well, we can just say we took a poll, and actually I don't know if we can go back to the actual poll numbers, but assuming we can put that up, shall I just say what the percentage was? I need somebody to say yay or nay. And Jemin is keeping quiet.
If you have the option of waiting to put it on your site, you may want to ask policy before you do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So I need somebody to stop me. So Mike, that's a good point. So we will check if there's any issues, and we will, if there are no issues, we'll put it up on the website. You'll take a look. Basically, it's a distribution of how many said they're doing theme 1 versus 2 versus 3.
Is it possible to establish new collaborations and partnerships during the course of the project? Or is it necessary to have all relevant partners engaged before submitting a proposal?
Yeah, all relevant partners should be in place. In other words, because remember, you have to deliver a timeline. You have to have a set of deliverables literally every 3 months and so on. Having said that, so your critical path for your project cannot depend on unknown outsiders, right? Because you can't depend on unknown unknowns kind of thing. So your critical path should be pretty well laid out. That doesn't stop you from saying, wow, I met this so-and-so person and they have a data set exactly like the data set I'm doing with my agency. And you know what, I can put that one in. Then I'd say, go for it. We know that nothing comes for free. So even though you think, oh, I can put this in, it still work. But if you can show us that additional work can be covered in your project plan under the 1.5 million, then sure, do it. But I would not write a proposal and draw a timeline assuming that I'm at some point going to get somebody who's going to do this for me and it's all going to work, because usually it doesn't work.
Thank you. I want to participate in this project as an individual, but not easy to resolve NDA issue. Is there any way to find third-party vendors to submit the proposal, or submit this proposal as an individual and build a company after receiving the grant?
Okay, there are multiple things packed in there, multiple questions there.
Yes.
The first part was putting it in, well, the first part I thought was actually about partnership. Can I find a partner?
Right. Is there any way to find third-party vendors to submit the proposal?
Right. And unfortunately, I'm trying to think if others have any ideas at NSF or elsewhere. You can certainly, I mean, I suppose if you sent us emails and said, I'm looking for such and such, it's the work of any program officer at NSF or anywhere else to help you find people who do the kind of research you're interested in or whatever. I'm sure we can, based on what we know. So it won't be may not be an exhaustive kind of system, but we might say, oh yeah, there is so-and-so interested in what you're doing. So it'll just be very hit or miss. The other question about the company is, well, that's much more tricky, because you may be putting together, I mean, there are, of course, intellectual, I mean, whatever you work on is under an IP regime of your organization. We want what you develop to be open. We want it to work with the fabric. Subject to modulo, I mean, subject to all of those criteria, if you're still able to spin out a company, that's more power to you. But you have to make sure that what you're submitting meets the requirements that have all been put out in the solicitation.
Okay. For theme 1, do we have to work with the following agencies listed? For example, NIJ, USGS, NOAA, etc. Or could we work with a different entity like the EPA, Veterans Affairs, etc.?
No, you can. In fact, I believe we even talked to VA. So, to be frank, the list of folks we have there are the folks whom we were able to contact and go through all who were kind enough to go through all the procedures at their end to get their names on board. It's just, I think at some point we run out of time for doing all that. So, and we've already received questions like this. I am working with so-and-so agency, is that okay? That's perfectly fine. Our motivation, you should understand the motivation for working with federal government agencies. As I said, NSF is not in the business of funding these kind of things forever. So what we are really trying to see here is, if you have one of those paper boats that you leave it on the lake and it goes off, that's what we are trying to do. And so and the lake is the agencies, right? If you find other agencies where this boat can float, that's more power to you, because we are looking for people who have so think of it this way. We are not looking for people who are willing to help you to get $1.5 million. We are looking for people who really have a problem that needs to be solved. And the $1.5 million you're going to spend on this project will solve their problem. Because once you solve their problem, they want that to continue, right? So that's the mindset is, am I doing something for this agency that's going to be a lasting impact? That's the societal impact aspect. That would be great for us, because then we would know that there are agencies that are willing to keep this going. So.
Okay. Similar or related, if NIH, for example, already supports their own Theme 1 projects, does that mean that submitting an NIH-oriented Theme 1 project is discouraged? I think Mike wants to jump in and answer that.
No, I was trying to clear some of the stuff that you guys are answering so that we don't have 62 and can tell what we actually have answered and not.
Yeah, I was doing the same thing.
Well, so I don't know what you mean by NIH-oriented, but I'll tell you right now in in our Convergence Accelerator track A, phase 2, we have a biomedical project. Sergio Baronzini at UCSF is the PI, and it's about putting together, I don't know, something like 40 or so different all biomedical and medical databases together through a knowledge graph mechanism. That was, and we funded it. Okay, that was perfectly fine for us, because in a sense, they're building a data knowledge infrastructure, which is in the wheelhouse for NSF. We cannot fund things that are purely based on like a disease, targeting disease solutions and so on, because that's NIH land. So yeah, if you're talking about so yes, but at the same time, you have to look at, okay, what did Sergio do, for example? Because he's already got one going. So that's why you should go do some research on what has been done. What has NIH done already? What have they funded? And so once you find your niche that has not been covered, and that's going to actually add to the overall knowledge base, that would be fine.
Thank you. Sounds good. Is this funding opportunity primarily aimed at projects that already have a history of collaboration with government agencies? How would you recommend applicants with promising projects in the private sector, but without prior experience interfacing with the public domain, showcase their potential in their proposals?
Oh, in their proposals?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're saying you should have had formal projects before, but you should show at least a good understanding and a good relationship, which can be had with various agencies without actually, being on a project funded by them. Maybe you have a professional connection, maybe you have done something in a different field with the same kind of data that the agency cares about, okay? So this is not a requirement that you should have had formal engagement before. If you were a company with a technology, I would definitely reach out to some agencies and get them on as partners. I mean, there is still a lot of time, depending on what you think of time. But you have time to, connect with agencies and say, hey, I've got this really cool technology. What do you have some problems that my knowledge graph technology can solve? And then you could form a team. But all of that would have to be done prior, to the extent that you can actually then develop a roadmap for 3 months, for 3 years, right? I think it's entirely possible to do such things. It may be a bunch of work between now and then, but it's possible. But again, only thing we are saying is you can't come in open-ended. You can't come in saying, I got this really cool technology. No, if only I find somebody with geospatial data, this is going to be great. And I'm going to spend my first 6 months looking for someone, because then that marriage may never happen, right? And then what do we do? So.
Will newly registered U.S. entities for British and European companies with existing clients be considered?
Wow. I think any US-based for-profit or non-profit or academia is eligible. That's all I can say. So you'll have to figure out if, I don't know if the CA folks, you have some better.
There's going to be some hoops to jump through to get registered for all of the various requirements, including the SAM database, getting registered in the NSF systems to submit. If you're a new entity and you're trying to get anything over a $500,000 award, you're going to have to go through a financial capabilities review. So it probably at this stage is advisable to have be on a team with another lead institution.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Mike. That's actually extremely wise advice, because if you're literally a brand new organization, there is a test procedure you have to go through at NSF before you're allowed to submit. That all takes a while. So your best bet is to find somebody who's already a US organization.
And the SAM.gov aspects are very complicated right now, because it's a requirement for any federal money, and whoever's administering that, it may be GSA, is having all kinds of issues, and there's a massive backlog on getting registered there.
Okay. Yeah, so I should say not just any US based, but people who already had experience with NSF. Those are the kind of people you want, ideally.
Yes. Does 1.5 million include indirect cost?
Yes, that's typical NSF. So all NSF awards are total cost, includes all overheads.
For theme 2, should the budget include costs for running the cloud service? What assumptions should be made about the runtime load, volume of data, level and intensity of concurrent access, etc.?
Well, I would have thought that's part of your competitive advantage in the proposal. Well, let's see, how do I answer that? Yeah, any cost that you incur during the project should be included in the budget. So that's the answer to the first part.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of estimation, I guess we are looking for people who are capable of such estimations, right? In other words, there are going to be 8 people. You can sort of guess, how much, would they have a petabyte in 6 months? I don't think so, right? So would they have a trillion triples? So, so you make an estimate about how much you are willing or capable to support, or how much you think you need to support, and be ready to expend that. Now, if you hit a wall, if you've expended it all and you don't have anything further, that's a bridge that maybe that's success, or I don't know, you have a runaway process in the cloud, either way, but that's something you'll have to cross that bridge when you get to it. So I would say you have to be judicious in how you lay out your resources.
When are the proposals due?
Oh,
Thank you.
June, we had it on the slide.
Yeah.
June 20th.
June 20th.
Can an FFRDC be a co-PI?
This FFRDC, I'm not good at FFRDC, but does anyone know this answer?
So, the issue with FFRDCs depends on where the money is coming from. So you cannot be drawing congressionally budgeted dollars and get NSF funding. That's considered double dipping. However, if you are in a space that is fee for service, so to speak, where you're not drawing federal dollars already from congressionally mandated budget, and you're only getting paid by the money coming in based on research grants and so forth, soft money and so forth, you can do it. I would suggest, though, a closer conversation, because things can get complicated at FFRDCs. We have had FFRDCs on projects in the Convergence Accelerator, but we just have to make sure how money is flowing in order to give a definitive answer, because some labs do have pieces of them that are, where they kind of work as consultancies. And off the top of my head, outside of FFRDCs, I can think of the Bureau of Lands Management has a part like that, the Army Corps of Engineers. We've also had Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore on projects. So there's some variance there that we just need to discuss.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So yeah, I guess the answer is, if you're an FFRDC thinking about it, maybe you should contact us. We can have a more detailed conversation.
Are there any guidelines as far as a minimum number of different data set sources that would be optimal for the synthesis of an effective knowledge graph over a given problem domain?
I would say, the solicitation says more than one. Basically, that's what it implies. And beyond that, I would say it depends on your use case. So go talk to the user and see what they want. What data sets do they want to get integrated? Sometimes you might be able to help them. They may not think as expansively. Maybe you can say, hey, how about this, that, and the other? And that's how you'll come to the conclusion of how many. The reason we said more than one is we didn't want to create solutions that are just looking at a single database, which is sort of an extreme point, because we want to get that interoperation. Two is way different than one. Now, is it 2, 3, 4, or 5? Depends really on your use case.
Are there any restrictions on non-U.S. nationals participating in the teams?
Ooh, I might have to send you to the NSF guidelines.
So that also, on that one, typically that has to go through OISE for approval. There's a form that needs to be filled out, and essentially the individual or institution has to be shown to be justified that their skill set or whatever they're bringing to the team is not available in the United States.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what you're asking, because if you're a non-US person at a university, that doesn't count. That's okay, because you might be a grad student or a faculty, actually. But maybe you're asking that you're an individual by yourself and not part of any organization, and you're not a US citizen, I guess. Then what Mike said is, yeah, it may be complicated.
How does NSF intend to handle IP associated with some of the technology that will be developed or is being developed as part of the work?
No, we don't plan to. So this is not a program that's going to deal with IP. So you're subject to the IP of your institution. We are asking for open, okay, in the sense that the system should be open. I'm trying to remember what we said in the data management plan, but we want open access to everything that you build. That could be through APIs or whatever. As discussed earlier, maybe not all of the data can be open, because there could be a lot of sensitive data and so on. That's okay. But beyond that, if you have invented, beyond that, I think you would be subject to the intellectual IP regime of your organization. If you're at a university, universities have all sorts of rules and regulations about who owns the IP. Similarly, if you're at a private organization, you probably find that you don't own the IP, they own your IP. So you're subject to your organization's IP rules.
And also BIDOL, which is government.
BIDOL?
Yeah. It doesn't mean that you get, the government owns the IP. It just means that the government gets some access, like a
Right.
license to use it.
Correct. So federal only use, we can still have it, but which may actually in this case be something interesting, because if it's only for federal agencies, maybe that's something that works, but you still own the IP.
Yeah. And BIDOL doesn't, there's also limitations on that too, but I don't think we want to get into those right now.
Okay. Thanks.
And Jemin, we have a bunch of other questions, but you tell me when you want me to stop.
Yeah, we are against the time, so it's 4 o'clock, 4:01 to be specific. So rest of the questions we could probably answer offline.
Yeah, we'll take one last one and then the rest we'll do offline. So how about the last one?
Okay. Could you elaborate on the government partnership you referenced? How would we demonstrate that partnership in a grant proposal? Can government persons provide letters of support, or is there a different mechanism?
Actually, I might even ask my colleagues here to jump in to say how they would see themselves in this, okay? But first, let me try to answer. It has to be a good partnership, a real partnership. And sometimes if it's a letter will always help. The letter has to be, I think there are NSF rules about what the letter can say. And the letter can't say things like, oh, this is a great project, if they get it, it'll be cool and I might use it. It should be substantive, and they should say, how am I actually going to work with these folks, okay? That kind of letter, if you want to get from an agency, the agency person may have to get clearance from above to be able to say, we're going to commit these resources. So a letter should really talk in terms of what resources would you be getting? And here resource could be anything. It could just be some amount of time that somebody provides you, or they might, presumably it's about data, right? Because you're going to get their data. So they might say, okay, here's where the data is, and they might give you some instructions about what the data is. So it starts anywhere from there to, you really want to have a more in-depth collaboration with them, because remember, you want to form this team right now as you're writing the proposal so that you can all figure out what am I going to build and how are you going to test it. And that might be the relationship you have with your government person. Is agency person might say, we got all this data, I can tell you where it is and how you can get to it. Now you got to do the job of making a knowledge graph, etc. out of it. And then you should be able to answer these questions and show me the result, and I'm going to give you feedback. So that's the kind of interaction. But at any level of interaction, a letter is probably always good. But what I'm saying is we'd like to see much more than just a letter. We'd like to see in the proposal, what was that engagement? And the rest of you have anything you want to say there about government partnership? What you would like to see?
I would add that if someone is interested in any part of the organization, we can help make those connections. It doesn't necessarily have to be just with the federal representatives.
Thank you, Dalia. Exactly.
And that, I think I totally agree with that. Plus, there our people have a lot of ideas about particular data sets within NIJ that would be appropriate to be linked and answer important questions.
Great. So yeah, it's worth repeating that these are only representatives of their agency. So you should feel free to talk to them if you want to get to other parts of their agency. I mean, they can help as best as they can. And I don't know if I should say, well, I'll say it. You, for example, if you talk with NIJ and they have like really sensitive data sets, let's say, for the purpose of the project, or at least the alpha version or something, you could fake it, right? You could create synthetic data, but you want to create synthetic data based on the real data. And this is where your interaction might help to say, am I creating the right kind of synthetic data? And the NIJ person might be able to look over your shoulder and say, yeah, that's the kind of thing, right? So those are the kind of relationships you would have. Okay, I think we should call it quits, call it a day. So thanks everyone for diving in. And I guess we would have answers to these on the listserv. Is that right, Jemin?
Yes, we will answer these questions. And if you wanted to engage with us, we have scheduled 3 office hours, and I posted a link in the chat where you could sign up for those office hours. There's a limit to 50 attendees to these office hours. So feel free to sign up for whatever that is most convenient to you. And also there will be an option to sign up for the email list in the program website. It's not currently up there yet, but it will be available where you can sign up for the email list. So any news and updates will be sent to you. Thank you all for attending.
Right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.